Welcome, friends,
to the How To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
And I'm Uncle Dan.
And I'm Uncle Duck.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
True! Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear, that's why we're here.
We're your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields,
we're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Oh my gosh, guys.
What? What'd I do? Is it me?
Did you know that we are only 500 episodes shy of the number of the beast of episodes?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Patreon goal.
It's just right around the corner.
It's just around the corner. 666 shows. We're almost there. So we've got Doug back. He's taken some hits, but he's here.
He's dented, but he's alive.
Hey.
Yeah.
I got city miles on me.
So we got a fun show today. We have a bunch of interesting stuff. I am going to talk about a thing that shouldn't exist in the world for a couple of reasons.
Yes.
And then I'm going to wallow in the reason why good things happen to bad people, and the answer is meh.
The answer is stupid is what the answer is.
Yeah.
And I have invited our dear friend Eli Bosnick, co-host of a lot of our favorite shows, including God Awful Movies and Scathing Atheist, to come on and explain to me how people keep tricking me.
Yes. Oh ho, it's magic.
And I'm not on that interview because I'm afraid of spiders, and Eli is.
He became aware of that.
He knows
Eli
that
tucked
now.
that into a fold of his brain, and it's going to stay there forever,
I know.
Doug.
I'll tell you what. Yeah.
Just
Now
be
you're
ready.
We can never
Eli.
see each other face to face.
Just be ready. So it's a great show. Please remember that we have apparently there's a wonderful community thriving in the unofficial Heretic Hangout on Facebook that our friend Joe runs. So go there if you want to yell at some other listeners. And our YouTube page, is that what you call it? A channel?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're old.
Oh my God.
Buy some of our merch.
Yeah.
Well, and our dear friend.
Oh, right.
Vern,
With the
who's-
merch. We never talk about the merch anymore.
Oh yeah, we don't have the merch.
Go to
Yeah,
the
we-
Heretic on our website. At the top is a tab for the Heretic.
I'm wearing a T-shirt. I'm wearing a How To Heretic T-shirt. It's handsome and comfortable.
You can literally furnish your house and most of your life out of the Heretic. It's crazy.
And we have Heretic condoms, and if you by voting with your money, you can choose your favorite uncle.
That's right.
I don't know how those things connect at all, and I'm not interested. So,
I think Doug was just hitting on our listeners. I think that's what that was.
Hey baby, swing at every pitch.
A ginger of his age, you got to do what you can do.
Got to do what you got to do.
So,
And you mentioned Mark, Uncle, or our friend Vern on YouTube, who's had a quite difficult road to hoe and is doing an awesome job, and we love him.
Yeah. So thanks. Really, he's been keeping it up over there, even though 2020 has singled him out for some specific abuse.
Jesus.
So we're a full spectrum podcast. We're everywhere.
That's right.
So go do the stuff and let's do a show.
Let's do the show.
Uncle Dan,
Hello.
COVID-19 has placed upon us a series
It's
of
the best of
restrictions.
the COVIDs.
Yeah, things that are onerous and unpleasant.
Yeah.
From not indoor dining or seeing the people we love, to the insanely difficult task of wearing a mask when we're standing in somebody's presence.
Oh, so hard.
But none of that compares.
Almost impossible.
None of that compares to the restrictions that Uncle Mark have placed upon us
That's
in
right.
trying to introduce his segment.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to surprise you guys. I just said there were two things they couldn't say, and we'll figure out what they are in a second. So, because I'm a bastard,
Jumanji.
COVID has turned me into a prick. So,
Is that
fellas,
COVID? Is that what did it?
It's the COVID, Dan. Thank you.
Did
Yes,
COVID start in 1968?
A whole bunch of trouble started in 1968. That's what happened.
Uncle Mark is old.
So, fellas, we each have our own particular beats down here to the heretique. And as Doug likes to say, I think this is what he said, is that Dan brings the Bible, Doug brings the Christian nationalism, and I bring the dumb. So please put that on my headstone, by the way. Here lies Uncle Mark. He brought the dumb. But within our beats are kind of subcategories. In my case, it feels like a kind of accidental pattern of segments. I, for some reason, have the snout of a truffle pig when it comes to sniffing out stories about disingenuous, duplicitous shysters that contributed to the immense suffering of perfectly innocent people during the absurd and ongoing satanic panic.
I said I was sorry.
People like Dan, of course, and the comic book scaremonger Jack Chick we talked about in episode 163, or Beatrice Sparks, the author of the staggeringly libelous fraud Jay's Journal in episode 159. And of course, we covered the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s itself in episode 23. If you aren't familiar with what that is, maybe you're too young or you're from Mars, please give that a listen, because it has morphed into, in this cursed fucking year of 2020, into something maybe even more stupid and potentially dangerous, QAnon, which we discussed in episode 102. That might need an update, Doug.
Yeah, for sure.
At some point here. Well, I was reading up on something else entirely. At this point, I don't even remember what it was. And I stumbled across today's subject quite by accident, and before I knew it, boom! It's the satanic panic again. 'Tis my row to hoe in this mortal probation, I suppose. But as they say in that wonderful musical, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, tragedy tomorrow, comedy tonight.
Ha-ha!
Let's start with some comedy, you guys. You guys like comedy, right?
I've never had it, but I assume people seem to enjoy it.
I'm a big fan of mad comic Rudy Giuliani myself.
Now, I won't ask you guys to name your favorite comedians, because at the rate those fuckers are going, any name you say will be canceled by the time this airs.
Gallagher.
100%.
But let's just say we've all had some laughs at stand-up comedians. But did you guys know there's something called... let me see here. Got to put my glasses on, because these two words are like matter and antimatter. They cannot exist next to each other in their natural states. Oh, yes. Christian comedy.
I mean, I'm aware that there are people who are Christian who consider themselves comedians.
It's apparently a real thing. And if you guys remember, we actually endured a few excruciating minutes of Christian comedy at the Ark Encounter last year, didn't we, guys?
We did.
Oh, my God.
I'll tell you what, though, that dude...
I had blocked it out, and then you brought it back. Why?
I'll tell you what, like, I've not seen a lot of live comedy shows, but that dude slew it.
Yeah. Dan is taking handfuls of forget-me-nows right now. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was amazingly terrible. So anyway...
he was an impressionist. That's what it was.
And you know who the kids love impressions of? Jimmy Cagney. Anyway, in the 70s and 80s, the real pioneer of this very sad subgenre of, quote, comedy was a guy by the name of Mike Warnke. Have you guys heard of him?
No.
Nope.
Mike Warnke recorded his first comedy album in 1975, and by the time he was done in 1989, he had released 10 more, selling millions of records and being crowned with the honor of, quote, the most popular Christian comedy album ever produced.
Wow.
How about that? It was also the first. So Warnke was using his comedy as his ministry and mixing in his very strange and painful history as part of the message. So good for him, I guess. So here's what kind of shocked me. He's not funny. I had a few solid laughs watching some of the clips of him. Yes, it's very safe, and it's pretty dated because it's from the 70s and 80s. But he's got wit, and he can easily punch up an anecdote and find the humor in it. And as a person who every week searches for the comedy and some pretty dark shit, I appreciate that. He's a very odd duck, which he's fully cognizant of, and kind of plays that for laughs, which is also cool because self-deprecation is normally not a fixture of Christian comedy, such as it is. And I don't want to be mean here. I just want to be really accurate.
No, you want to be mean.
He looks like, well, he looks pretty much exactly like Kim Davis, that horrible county clerk in Kentucky, that went to jail for not issuing a marriage license to a gay couple. I'm going to text you guys the picture of him.
No,
right
I
now.
remember her because her husband showed up for the trial in his best, his dress overalls.
I just sent you a picture of him.
Oh my God.
That's Mike Warnke. Am I wrong?
No.
Oh my God.
I thought that you were exaggerating for emphasis and humor. You were just describing the person.
No, I've spotted an imposter.
What's the dude?
Yeah.
What's the dude who created the Wall of Sound? The producer.
Phil Spector.
It's like Phil Spector in Witness Protection.
Yeah.
So
As Philomena Spector.
Warnke looks so much like Kim Davis that if we slid her out and slid him in during dinner, the only way her husband would know something was up would be that she was suddenly funny. Like he's nailed her right down to the glasses and the sister wife hair. Right? It's crazy.
It's very
It's kind of nuts.
So anyway, here's a little sample of his comedy stylings. Playing up on his weirdness, he observes, questions occur to me that don't occur to normal people, like, why do people drive on a parkway and park on a driveway? Sure. How do you get Teflon to stick to a skillet when nothing sticks to Teflon? Or how do you know when yogurt's gone bad? Or what would it be like to try to nail Jell-O to a wall?
You might be a Christian comic if...
Safe, but okay. He does have funnier bits, but I didn't want to spend my entire Saturday transcribing them. So, Warnke was killing it with his albums and endless live show tours, selling out huge arenas. But what really launched this unlikely comet of Christian comedy? He came to fame of a sort with a book he wrote after his Navy service in Vietnam called The Satan Seller. In it, he describes his tumultuous young life of being orphaned at 12 years old and then bouncing around between family and then finding some stability through high school, a very short stint in community college, becoming a rapey and blood-sacrificing satanic high priest of a coven of 1,500 Satanists in San Bernardino, and then honorable service and earning a Purple Heart as a Navy corpsman in Vietnam before finding Jesus and coming home to settle down. A pretty uneventful memoir, really.
I'm just going to say, boys will be boys.
What's his name again?
Mike Warnke.
Okay.
Warnke. So, as we know, Christians love them a serious redemption story, and his was a whopper. In this 1972 cry from a sad Satanist's heart, Warnke became very much like a combination of the poor girl in Beatrice Sparks's Go Ask Alice, of her of Another Day, Another Blowjob, and the salaciously fictionalized Jay in Jay's Journal, an alcoholic, a blue ribbon drug user and pusher, a pimp, an animal abuser, and a rape-adjacent high priest to a massive coven of Satanists in sleepy San Bernardino, California. All in the space of the just under 9 months between graduating high school and going to Navy boot camp.
Like you do.
From teenage druggie to high priest in 9 months.
Everybody's got to have a summer job.
Hey, have achievable goals. Goals or goves.
This kid's going places. Hail Satan. So, quick anecdote to the drug dealing part of the story. He claimed he sold $50,000 worth of cocaine and in exchange received several bundles of $100 bills. Cool.
All right.
That's a lot of money, but $50,000 in $100 bills is just over 2 inches high. Not even rising to the bare minimum of a single bundle. Methinks I smell a rat. Now, we talked about the societal realities in America at that time and how vulnerable the country was to this kind of bullshit in our Satanic Panic segment. But the Christian community and the country at large ate this shit up. It sold like whatever hot breakfast food evangelicals eat and launched his wildly successful career in ministry. But there was a little problem. People knew Mike, lots of them. He had plenty of friends in high school and junior college. In 1991, at the height of Warnke's success, a Christian magazine called Cornerstone had been getting tips that things in Mike's story didn't add up. John Trott and Mike Hertenstein, the Woodward and Bernstein of Christian investigative journalists, went hard at the Mike Warnke story. Color me shocked that there are hardcore evangelical investigative journalists, but apparently it's a true.
Oh, my God.
So
no, it was a true in the 70s.
Yeah, no more, right? So anyway, they contacted scores of those people to discuss the details of Warnke's biography. Some had read it, many had not, but to a person, they were shocked by the portrait the Satan Seller presents. They universally said he was a storyteller and a fabulist, for sure, but not the person the book describes. In it, Warnke depicts himself as a falling down drunk with bleached hair down to his waist, covered in scabs from injected drugs, and hauntingly skinny from the speed he was hoovering, as well as wandering around with a revolver that he was apparently frequently pulled out and threatened people with. To a person, again, the dozens of friends, acquaintances, even girlfriends say the opposite was true. He was a normally built, short-haired, classic nerd who barely drank and never smoked or did drugs, and free from needle-mark tracks all over his body. Just like the stories told by Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pasder in their insidious book Michelle Remembers, where a young Michelle was tortured and disfigured by Satanists, friends and family, as well as photographs of the time, show a perfectly healthy child with no evidence of the nightmarish physical torture her, quote, recovered memories claimed she had.
Right.
Same too with Warnke.
Mark, did anybody look under the mullet?
It is an impressive mane of hair.
It's a woolet. It's a fillet.
It's quite a coiffeur.
It's whatever, a Christian comedy mullet of some kind.
Yeah.
So the comedic irony here is, despite his claims of massive drug and alcohol abuse, according to everyone he knew in high school and college, he was a square to his toes. But, as described in the Cornerstone article, during the wild 1980s, when he was on the road touring his comedy and pulling in millions, he actually did become the Dewey Cox character from Walk Hard.
Of course he did.
Getting deeper and deeper into boozing, drugs, and sex. Who knew the Christian comedy circuit was like being on the road with the Stones in their heyday?
Right.
This period might explain his 3 failed marriages. Marital fidelity, while generally considered a priority in Christian ministry, was not among Warnke's many talents.
Warnke 2024.
One night, in a drunken rage, he threw his then wife into a wall and caused a huge bleeding gash in her head. He told her if she went to the hospital and mentioned he'd done it, he'd have her killed.
Oh, my God.
She got the fuck out. Later, when friends asked where she'd gone, he told one that the mob had killed her and thrown her in a ditch, and he told another that she had drowned.
Wow.
Yeah, he's something.
You can't. I mean, that it's just a little bit more extreme than she moved to Albuquerque or whatever.
Yeah. Actually, in the story, it says she drove all night till she got to Pensacola, and that made me laugh out loud. I don't know why. Maybe it's that Pensacola being your safe haven is a very sad thing in life. But
I drove all night till I got to Pensacola has to go on the same level of Another Day, Another Blowjob. That's brilliant.
But despite
I'm
his
sure that was a Johnny Cash song. Drove all night till I got to Pensacola, right?
But despite his fear and loathing style downward spiral, the money kept pouring in. He and his next wife bought a huge old plantation and horses. They had the house declared the property of their ministry, so they didn't have to pay taxes on it, which is classic.
As you do.
Thank you, America, for allowing religious grifters to pull this shit on the regular. He kept writing books and producing albums, and his ministry was raking in the cash. Ministry employees interviewed by Cornerstone expressed horror at how the donations were used. Basically, Warnke took all of it. All the programs for helping prisoners, drug users, and the victims of ritual satanic abuse that they promised the donations were funding never happened. He just took it all.
There's a shock.
And over time, his story kept evolving and growing, his resume inflating with his bank account and his alimony payments. He originally claimed he had 2 bachelor's degrees, but over the years that swelled to 2 master's degrees and then to a PhD in philosophy. His Vietnam story in The Satan Cellar had him wounded twice in combat, even though Army or Navy records say once, but that swelled to 5 times in a later book. Now, you may be asking, Uncle Mark, who gives a shit if some Christian huckster shakes some coins out of the credulous rubes and tells them stories they so desperately want to believe? They do that all the time. Well, lying to old ladies to get them to send you their Social Security checks makes you a pretty shitty human being, in my humble opinion. But he's far from alone in that Christian grift. It's a hell of a crowded field. So Mike's rousing observational comedy shows would suddenly take a turn from the giggles, which is kind of where I was building to stories like this, and I'm quoting him here. Oh, and by the way, this is some extreme violence against a child. Just know that it didn't happen. So
Are you going to veer into anthill kids territory right now?
a little bit.
Okay.
So
Fun.
remember, this didn't happen. So I'm talking about a little girl who was murdered last year, 1987, in the state of Louisiana by having her sexual organs cut out while she was still alive. A lot of you think that when a Satanist kills, they do so because they want to spill blood. You've seen enough late-night movies to think that. But if a Satanist or other kinds of occultists kill an animal or a human sacrifice, it's not to spill blood, it's to release the life force. Because when the life force is released and you've done the right incantations and rituals, you can absorb that force, they say. And it makes you a stronger wizard or warlock or whatever. And
Wow.
the longer the death and the more prolonged the death and the more agonizing the death, the more force is released. So they took this little girl and killed her by cutting her sexual organs out while she was still alive. And after she was dead, they cut her chest open and took her heart and cut it up
My God.
in little pieces and took communion on it. And after she was dead, they cut down both sides of her head and took down the back, and they peeled the flesh away from the bone. They stole her skull to be used in satanic rituals. They took her
Was
mutilated.
this part of his act?
That is after. I want to know if you can nail Jell-O to a wall. I'm serious. The same show. So
Fuck.
yes, they took her mutilated body, put her in a garbage sack, and threw her in the dump. Despite this being 1,000% total bullshit, and people tried to find evidence of, like a police report in Louisiana of this happening in 1987, nothing, of course.
Well, because they hadn't discovered the use of the word adrenochrome yet.
That's right. And time is a flat circle.
That's what sells it.
So this is the kind of dangerous fucking bullshit he was peddling, right? His was a family show.
Oh my
You
God.
take the whole family
no,
to
it
see
wasn't.
the show.
That may have been what he said, but no, it definitely was not.
It was the Manson family show.
It was the Manson family show, and his audience believed this completely.
Of course.
So why I think we need to drag the humiliated Mike Warnke back through the mud is not just because he was an asshole that squeezed cash out of fearful senior citizens, but that his bullshit story of having been a rape-adjacent satanic high priest, asterisk, even that evolved. In later narratives, he said he himself had committed several acts of violent rape, but apparently going to the police and turning himself in and seeking to offer restitution to the victims was not part of God's program or forgiveness for him, because those things never happened.
Yeah, but talking about it in a public show totally is like yeah, you didn't go to the cops, but you're copping to it on
No,
stage?
Dan, it's just like if you can't arrest me if you don't tell me you're a cop. If I admit to it publicly, it's okay.
That's right.
Ollie, oxen free.
So
That's right.
It's in the Magna Carta.
So his bullshit stories were taken as gospel truth, not only by the hayshakers and the holy rollers, but they were by the police and the media as well. The stories in the Satan Cellars and the stories he told on the road were actually used in court to help build cases against totally innocent people charged with crimes of a satanic nature.
Of course it was.
Like Michelle remembers and Jay's journal, Warnke's book became a cornerstone of the madness of the satanic panic.
God damn it.
So Warnke appeared in the media as an expert on devil-worshipping, child-murdering mania that was sweeping the country. His writing was actually included in Chick Tracts, and most famously, he appeared on ABC's 2020, one of the worst mainstream vectors of the lies and misinformation that fueled the satanic panic.
Right.
People's lives were destroyed in that nightmare, like lots of them. There are innocent people who were swept up in the panic Warnke helped generate that have just gotten out of prison recently, like the totally railroaded West Memphis Three, and even they, even when they were totally exonerated and their innocence was proven, the state only let them out with absurd conditions.
What was that? Was that the Alvin appeal?
It's the Alvin appeal, or so they don't. Yeah, the state doesn't admit wrongdoing.
But they admit guilt, but the state is not going to prosecute them.
That's it. Yeah, it's total bullshit. So, and Warnke did it all for the money. Cornerstone asked to interview him for their broadside of a story in 1992, and he basically refused. He released a statement after it went to print, insisting that every word of his books were 100% factual. But pretty much nobody believed him. He was fucked. His ministry and empire basically collapsed. He's still around at 73, trying to gin up his old comedy career by occasionally playing small church meetings in Kentucky, but the magic's gone. So what can we learn from this, guys? Maybe that if you tell a bunch of lies to a willing audience to make a buck, and those lies end up hurting a ton of innocent people who got sent away for the worst crimes imaginable, come clean about it and try to make it right. But
Right.
Yeah, right.
I think the larger lesson is this. The Christian comedy circuit, like fragrant opium, is a path fraught with danger, right? Once you get a taste, all you ever want is more. So be warned.
Well, I'm just going to say this. You said Christian comedy, then you said, you hearkened back to an older time, and I suddenly flashed on the only comedian I can remember ever enjoying doing comedy that was sort of Christian-based, which was the fantastic show Bill Cosby himself. Now, that has soured some. So I think that the lesson here is clear that Christian comedians are all psychopaths.
Yeah, so the filthier you are, the probably better person you are as a comedian.
I just sent both of you a picture of Donald Trump's previous doctor.
Yes.
And you have to prove to me that it's not the same person
That it's not
in,
Mike
in the
Warnke.
seventh act of his life.
So, yeah, that's it. So let us bid a hearty go fuck yourself to the high priest of nothing, guys, Mike Warnke.
Yeah, fuck you, Mike.
Oh boy! With that delight,
With gusto.
in its place, let's move along.
Uncle Dan,
Hey,
I'm a big fan of Jay-Z.
yes,
As you
I'm
know.
aware of your hip hop credentials.
I'm the rare gay man that prefers Jay-Z to Beyonce. But
Mark is the original hip-hopopotamus.
I am the hippopotamus. And as I like to say, as Jay-Z likes to say, I got 99 problems and evil ain't one of them.
Yes, well, that I have a problem with evil. I think that evil is
Suit
probably
yourself.
bad, and I don't understand why it exists. Uncle Doug, help
us.
Wait, whoa. That's a far larger assignment than I think I was tasked with, but fair enough.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
You have to solve it.
To solve evil? That's what I have to do in the next 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Well, if you can do
All
it in 15, that'd be great.
Well, dear uncles, I actually kind of thought about this segment when we talked last about the book of Ecclesiastes,
Oh yeah.
which has a chapter that wrestles with the idea of the problem of evil quite eloquently, but unsuccessfully, which is strange to find that chapter in the Bible, but there it is.
Yeah.
And so, if we go back in time, which we can't, to when our, ancestors first climbed out of the trees, and then one of them looked at the sunrise and said, "I wonder why that is." Right? And which happened. This is the thing. This happened.
Yeah, well, after they tried to kill it.
Right, exactly. They threw their spears at it, didn't work. But from that point on, there has been this, that was the birth of religion. We might not ever know. It was certainly the birth of a belief system because our pattern-seeking brains were trying to explain why the sun rose and set and the seasons changed. And so we, in all likelihood, came up with the idea of religion, of a higher power.
Right.
Because when our ancestors did a thing and caused something to happen, like killing an enemy died. And so the idea of causality entered the human brain.
Right.
And then
or more specifically, early on, it wasn't a god, but many gods.
Right. Well, we don't know that, but that's a fair point, and we'll certainly explore that. That we believe that there to be causality in all things, and of course, we didn't know why the sun rose or the seasons changed, but we thought we could explain it, and so we created, we assume, religion to explain those things, and instantly was born this idea of the problem of evil. And we, as we'll talk about, this problem persists paradoxically to this day. But that if there were powers out there that could make the sun rise or set or the seasons change, that they could cause good or bad in the lives of the creatures that lived under them. We don't know what the religions of the our deep ancestors were, But we do know that the religions we do know about were not monotheistic. They were polytheistic.
Right.
And as far as we can tell, that was a good way to explain the problem of evil. So let's back up for a second and explain what the problem of evil was and is. And of course, it's very, very basic. It's why do good things happen to bad people?
It's why is there Doug?
Why is there Doug?
And as 2020 has shown us, why do bad things never happen to bad people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the other side of the coin. Why do bad people prosper? Right. Yeah. So we struggled with this idea of why is it good to be virtuous, and deep in our DNA is embedded the idea that we should help our fellow creatures out. And we're not alone in this. In a lot of higher creatures, like larger, more intelligent mammals, we see this kind of activity. But we see it in lesser animals too, where the good of the species is worthwhile to the good of the individual, right? But bad things befall us all. So the problem of evil is kind of, and again, this is such a strange thing to say, the problem of evil, but other religions have dealt with this in very interesting ways. So why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? The polytheists, who, were the Greeks and the Romans and their ancestors, they had a very elegant solution for this. There were many gods. And many gods...
were all assholes.
They were all assholes.
Yeah.
But the many gods had the same passions as the humans.
Yeah.
Right.
So if your crops failed, you probably somehow pissed off the god of the harvest. If there was a flood, you probably somehow pissed off the god of the ocean or failed to ameliorate their opposite god.
Right.
So that's one way of looking at it. The Hindus chose a different way of explaining this, where it's if you suffer some kind of evil in this life, it's because of some sin you perpetrated in a past life. And
sure.
That sounds ridiculous because it is, but it has a kind of explanatory power. The Buddhists, they found a way to explain it by saying that if you can't properly find a way to separate yourself from the base level of the earth, then you're subject to its travails. So, okay, those are explanatory. But they basically, the way they explained the fact that evil happens to good people and the vice versa is just to kind of spread it around. Right? Like, okay, well, the gods themselves are kind of shitty. That doesn't necessarily explain away evil. It just kind of pushes it out. Right?
Sure.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. And I think, if I've read my histories of these things properly,
and what's the chances of that?
Very low, extremely low. For instance, the Greek or Roman pantheon, those gods were not, quote, worshipped in the same way that, say, the monotheistic God Yahweh in Christianity
Most definitely.
and Judaism.
Yeah, and we'll talk
they
about
were
that.
respected,
Right.
but they were not.
Well, because they could kick your ass.
Right.
Like, they were respected in the same way that, like, a dipshit Trump supporter with an AR-15 in the Walmart is respected. Like,
That's exactly right.
you got to be careful with those guys.
Yeah.
It didn't explain away the notion of evil. It just kind of pushed it out, right?
Yeah.
So the quote unquote problem of evil didn't become acute until the monotheistic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But at least in Judaism, Jehovah was a cunt, right? Like Jehovah. If you read the Old Testament,
He's the worst.
yeah, you can.
And so were the Jews. Like, this was a toxic relationship.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But in the Bible itself, Jehovah is ascribed with jealousness, vengefulness, regretfulness, pettiness, violence, manipulation.
Yeah.
He was impossibly cruel and oftentimes murderous.
And
right?
it was overt. It was the Lord God is a jealous God. It wasn't. That wasn't just like.
It's in the text.
Yeah.
Yeah, for death. So you can. The paradoxical idea is that if something good happened to you in the time of Jehovah, it was harder to explain than why something bad happened to you, because Jehovah was just a terrible, terrible person.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, we know now that he was probably subsuming other gods as it went.
Right.
And so their traits were ascribed to him. But it doesn't necessarily, or in any way, explain the problem, quote unquote, of evil. So you get past Jehovah, but we're into monotheism now. And we come across Jesus Christ, who is supposed to be this benevolent overlord who loves everyone and cares about us all, and the death of a sparrow is important to him.
Yeah.
Yet, terrible things happen all the time.
That Bible passage was on Dick Cheney's Christmas cards tells you all you need to know.
The fact that he actively hunted sparrows.
Yeah, and ended up shooting his friend.
And occasionally shot his friends in the face for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we come to this place where we're kind of confronted with this idea that there is an ever-loving God, a single one, that loves everyone equally, et cetera, but bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
And that is
issue.
a paradox that's very difficult to wrestle with. And so
maybe.
But here's the thing, is scholars in even the time of Aristotle and Plato wrestled with this notion of what we call now theodicy. We'll get to why that's called what it is and what it means, but the idea that there is evil, that happens to everybody no matter how good a life you live. It was just a slight bit easier to explain in the time of Aristotle and Plato because the gods were kind of a mixed bag. And Jehovah was such an asshole that, like I said, it was kind of hard to not explain.
Yeah.
But now you enter the time of Jesus Christ where he's supposed to be loving of all people. It's this total, love fest. All people are beautiful. Everyone's worth something. Yet, terrible things happen to everybody. Now, monotheism has been with us since the Bronze Age, and it was kind of easy to explain away why good things happen to bad people because it was the Bronze Age, and bad things happen to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It was kind of the number one
good
leading
thing
cause.
happening was as rare as Halley's Comet.
Right. It was the leading cause of death up until a certain, recent history. But it wasn't until the Enlightenment where we started to really consider why. So let me back up just one more second. Thomas Aquinas and our friend St. Augustine wrestled with this a bit. And they were trying to figure out, even in the context of the Black Death and the Crusades, why good things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to good people, etc. And they came up with the answer that persists to this day. It is the ultimate, one of the two ultimate get-out-of-jail-free cards of Christianity.
Right.
Any guesses?
Lord works in mysterious ways.
That's one of them.
And
Don't trust the white man.
don't go swimming for an hour after you eat.
Okay, three. There were three.
Right. What's the third one?
Free will.
Free will, of course.
Free will is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for why God does terrible things.
So explain that argument. Just
like you said, Uncle Dan, is there's just magic. And that's when you put anyone in a corner on a Bible story about, how did this happen? How did that happen? The flood, everything else. It's like, just God is magic. Once you push them far enough into a corner, it's like, well, God's all-powerful. So, okay, we can have a flood that's global because God's magic.
Right.
The other corner you can push them into is like, why do good people who are in every way wonderful, why do bad things happen to them, or vice versa? Why do good things happen to people who are purely evil?
Right.
And the answer is inevitably free will.
Meaning?
Man is allowed, God is affording us on this earth the opportunity to
fuck up,
to be tested.
Yeah.
Right.
And we will one way or another. You'll go this way, we'll go that way, and then we'll be judged in the end. Okay, so leave that aside for a second. That's where St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas landed, and many other scholars of the pre-Enlightenment. But we get to the Enlightenment, and then you've got Kant and Locke and Hobbes, who are not religious people, right? So they stop focusing on the problem of evil and start focusing on the fact that evil is a problem. And it's that human beings are imperfect, up-jumped apes. We are passionate and, reactionary, and there is no higher power that's ascribing anything to us. There's no higher power that's governing us. It's just that from time to time we can be shitty. And that's a problem.
Well, and random shit can happen.
Also that. Hurricanes and earthquakes can happen, and they afflict everyone alike. And cancers can grow in the body. And so they were the first group, and again, let's not give too much credit to the Enlightenment scholars. Thomas Jefferson was certainly a great author, but he thought, you know what, she'll love it. So
he's a mixed bag, that's for damn sure.
A lot of mixed bags in the Enlightenment, but they were the first ones to say, you know what, maybe it's not about some higher power, it's just simply about the human condition.
Right.
But the strain of religious thinking that Augustine and Aquinas were espousing somehow survived the sunlight that was the Enlightenment to this day. Yep. So and free will is their thing. And so, the last philosopher I'll talk about, because it's kind of interesting, is Max Weber, or I guess Max Weber, who was born of the same morass and moral decay that gave light to Marxism. Right, because he was also working in London and Moscow in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
If you're going to be by city, you're going to have two homes in that time. Pick, one of them can be on the Mediterranean.
Seriously.
Yeah, go someplace sunny for half the year. Jesus Christ, London and Moscow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so what gave life to both Karl Marx's ideas and Max Weber's ideas were if you haven't read The Jungle, the meatpacking industry was so insanely onerous at the time.
Unlike now.
Right. No, but even exactly. But the horror stories was that somebody would slip and fall into the meat tank, and they would just get stirred into it and processed.
That's free meat, is what that is.
Right. Exactly.
Man meat ain't cheap, Doug.
Believe me, I know.
That's the title of Uncle Mark's memoir, actually.
That's my unauthorized autobiography.
Listen, I've had to settle for monkey meat this entire quarantine, so, sacrifices.
You do live near the zoo.
That's true. So anyway, the problem of evil, as we're talking about, kind of somehow made it through the Enlightenment. But just to back up for a second, the term was coined by Gottfried Leibniz. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that right, in 1710 in his work Theodicy.
It's amazing that you weren't actually born in Germany. Your pronunciation is unbelievable.
Leibniz, by the way, looks like what would happen if the hairstyles of the 1980 hair metals band were brought to life and suckled on a steady diet of creatine and cocaine. Or Michael Warnke, either one. Yeah. So free will is the path that has allowed this notion to live to our day. So somehow today, even now, in our enlightened time, when people are kind of confronted by how do bad things happen to good people, free will is their get out of jail free card. And I want to just kind of touch on one example that I think both of you remember, or at least remember from kind of mythology, that is so onerous and disgusting, but I imagine is so ubiquitous in religious thinking. Mm. Do you remember a story when in Mormonism, a very severely Down syndrome kid went to have his patriarchal blessing? Mm. Do you guys remember the story?
No, it's not ringing a bell.
And he was worth a certain amount of cows, but they wanted it's a different story. Never mind. Go on.
So he went to have his patriarchal blessing, which we talked about in a previous episode, and the patriarch said, "This is really hard to say." He was one of the angels who literally cast Satan out of heaven with his own hands. And Satan, as he fell away from heaven, looked back at the angels who'd cast him away and vowed revenge strictly and directly upon them. What? So God, in his wisdom, struck this kid with severe Down syndrome. So
that was the cause of his Down syndrome.
Satan couldn't find him on this earth.
Oh,
wow!
Do you guys not remember that story?
I've never heard that story.
Isn't that the plot of the movie Constantine? I'm not sure.
If I had heard that story, I would have burned the Ward building to the ground.
I'm challenging any of our Exmo listeners. I'll bet you there are some that remember that story.
Oh my god.
I'm sure there are.
That's so fucking weird.
It's so fucked up because, okay, it explains away the this terrible thing, and let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
This disability that has befallen this person.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, okay, so what about every other person who has Down syndrome? What about every other person who's born with a disability? Do they all have personal stories to explain away this disability?
I mean, listen, a patriarchal blessing is basically a psychic reading.
At best, it's
And yeah, that's what they do. Is they try and come up with some. You were Joan of Arc in a previous life. You were this. I mean, it's the same shit.
It's like any past life regressive therapy. You were never a peasant. You were always you were royalty.
Everyone was royalty.
Yeah, exactly.
But I
was Catherine the Great. It was wonderful.
Legit, not to. I don't want to dwell on this because it's so vile. But Saint Augustine and Aquinas are just two of many, many scholars who have dug into this idea of theodicy as a way to explain away this notion of how bad things happen to good people. And there has been so much ink spilled on it, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that an omnipotent, omniscient, all-loving God, creator of the universe, who could solve any of these problems at any time.
Yes.
Doesn't because it's your fault.
Right.
Or
just free will, but again, free will, like the idea that, okay, well, humans should be allowed to make mistakes is a fine thing to think about until you talk about gay marriage or trans rights or anything else where a minority is allowed to express themselves under the rule of a majority. Right? It's always, always, always what's good for me, not for thee. Right? So, I don't... coming to the final point of this, it's a negation of the inevitable and obvious point that we have all come to understand, that the universe is vast. We are a fleeting blink of light on the surface of a single planet, and the universe doesn't really know about us, and if it does, it doesn't seem to like us very much. And so bad things happen, and it sucks, but we only have one life to live. And to try and find some kind of notion of like why bad things happen to you but not to me, or that bad things happen to you because you're evil, or good things happen to an evil person because God is biding his time, is so vile and evil.
Yeah.
And so if anyone ever brings up theodicy in an argument with you, they've lost.
Just walk away.
Well, they really have no other option. I mean, if you're a believing Christian and you believe in that sort of God I just mentioned, but he fails to show his face and his hand whenever the world needs it, you've got to come up with a reason.
Well, and here's the thing. This whole idea, the whole argument of free will, this idea that God had to create a test for us, and that test required us all to have to be able to make our decisions, be they good or evil or whatever. It does, like, I've asked believers this: why can't God just make us all good? Why would there be a need for a test? And believe me, whatever their answer is, if you keep following the logic,
that's exactly right.
You'll come to a dead end. There's
exactly.
no road where that logic makes sense. There's no way to go down where it makes sense for an omnipotent being to create beings that he claims to love implicitly.
Yeah.
And then make them shitty.
Well,
just make us perfect from the beginning and skip the whole hell thing. There's no point to it at all. And everybody goes to heaven. We can even skip Earth. Let's just go to heaven and party. What's going on?
Well, and the problem of evil, which I think I just remember every time I've said that, I hope you understand there's giant air quotes about that, remains historically and will so forever be the biggest reason people leave religion, myself included. That there is no answer. There is no logical or satisfactory answer for why bad things happen to good people if there is any kind of a God who gives a shit.
Right.
And you know, like if you see a dog on the freeway, Uncle Mark and I have experienced this firsthand, or a kitten in the street, or a child in distress, and you simply look over and say, well, you know what, free will.
Yeah.
You're a monster, and you don't deserve to be followed or worshipped in any way, shape, or form. So I just theodicy is just a very, very smart sounding word for a very inadequate explanation for the way the world is. And I don't love the fact that the universe is empty, but it is what it is, to quote Donald Trump. Forgive me.
It is what it is. You know, I mentioned this before on the show, and it's a very funny thing, except that it's caught up in the horribleness of all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. But there was a meme online a while ago that was, you know, a depiction of the Milky Way galaxy from a distance, and over it said "No lives matter."
Oh, right.
And I think that goes to your point, right? It's like we are dust.
Dust in the wind.
But
all we are is dust in the wind.
It goes to the opening of the show. You only have one life, so make the best of it. Don't pretend it's something that it's not. Don't waste your time on notions that are destructive and useless. Like, this is it, man. We got this.
Yeah, stop making excuses for a shitty God that doesn't exist, for fuck's sake.
So it was a long-winded way for me to get there.
Right. Well, we loved it.
We got there. I like it. And I think that now that we've solved the problem of evil, we can move on. Gentlemen, look, Doug seems to still have a job, but Uncle Mark, you and I are we're currently unemployed. We're basically homeless.
If this is what retirement is, I say no, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Well, if you think having a job during COVID is a relief, I have some stories to tell.
Sounds like paradise.
Anyway, the point that I'm trying to get to is that people are, out of the kindness of their hearts,
truly
hear the pathetic thing that we put out into the world and think, oh God, they need money.
Yeah.
And give us some. And that is a very sweet and wonderful thing that they do. And we have some folks to thank today. So, without further ado, thanks to Jim, to Bananas, and Uncle Mark, you, my friend, must give a saint to Sam.
Oh, Sam, we've been out of the saint business for a couple weeks, so this feels like we're back in the game, baby.
Yeah,
I feel like I got $20 to take back to the gambling table here. So let's see. Is this Sam?
Sam.
Yeah. Okay. Sam is forever under the protection and the watchful eye of Saint Roberetti di Manchego of the Airlock. And
I'm pretty sure Roberetti is what Joe Biden's middle name is.
That's his Italian middle name. Yes. So
that's right.
I think it's Roxette.
And Saint Roberetti of the Airlock is the patron saint of non-Euclidean pasta shapes, electromagnetic abundance, and the Casper, Wyoming metropolitan area.
All right.
Oof, it was good until then.
You know,
sorry, Casper. I'm kidding.
Listen.
Casper actually is a beautiful town.
Really?
No, they're dangerous people, so don't beat me up.
Anyway, Sam, you are now protected. Well done. Thank you. Thanks to all of our patrons for the use of your money. We appreciate it. If you want to become a patron and be perhaps sanctified the way Sam has been, you can go to, thank God.
Oh, nice try.
Can I just say, in all our defense today, we're recording very late for our normal.
Yeah, it's my fault.
Our
brains
normal
are not working.
Work day.
How to Heretic. That's the name of this show.
Yes.
Go to the howtoheretic.com.
It's after 3 p.m. We're all drunk and well into our medicine for the elderly.
Indeed. So, howtoheretic.com. You'll find all of your ways to donate to us, and we would sure appreciate it. Let's move on.
Love you guys.
Well, Uncle Mark,
Here I am.
last week I talked about NLP or neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
And my conclusion at the end of that segment was that sort of therapeutically it was largely bunk, but that there might be a side of it that was more sinister. The truth is that I didn't want to say that last bit because I was deeply skeptical of the idea, but I didn't have any way of debunking it. And looking at how Nancy Saltzman, who was sort of, the NXIVM woman who was trained in NLP and hypnosis, looking at how she was able to start a very, very sort of manipulative cult.
Yeah. She was.
I don't know. It seemed possible she was using nefarious tricks to fool people's brains.
She was the Ma Na Sheila of NXIVM, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we'll get to that laughter in a minute.
Everyone who doesn't get that.
Yeah, fuck everyone who doesn't know the most interesting person that ever lived, Ma Na Sheila.
Oh my God, I'm such a Sheila fan. I was
Yeah.
so team Sheila throughout that whole show. Go see Wild Wild Country if you haven't.
She is
watched
proof
it.
that the devil would be amazing if he was real.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, the idea kept nagging at me. What is real? Can a person really have sort of deep and powerful impact on the brain of someone that they just met? I've seen TV shows and videos of people seeming to to read people's minds or trick them into doing stuff. I watched recently. When I was researching NLP, I actually watched a video. Somebody was sort of talking about NLP, and then they showed a video of Darren Brown, who's a UK mentalist, a famous sort of UK hypnotist, mentalist, whatever. And he did this astounding thing where he took blank paper that were sort of cut into dollar bill sized sheets, put them in his wallet, walked into a store that it was pretty clear he had never been in before, looked at some merchandise, and then pulled out, and then and this was sort of in the context, I'm reading this or watching this in the context of having been reading about NLP. And he says, and he's telling a story about his friend and the subway, and he's like, and I was nervous to ride the subway here, but my friend said, it's fine, just take it. And as he's saying, it's fine, just take it, he's pulling out these blank pieces of paper, and the person who runs the shop seems to just accept it as cash and lets him walk out of the shop with the merchandise. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what to believe. But wait, I said to me, I know someone who totally knows what to believe. A mentalist. Someone who has performed mind tricks in front of thousands of credulous dupes. So, Eli Bosnick, welcome back to the How To Heretic.
Oh, credulous dupes are truly my bread and butter. Thanks for having me, guys.
Eli, have you been going into stores again and paying with bond paper?
Yeah, exactly. I just walk in with receipt paper and I walk out with the store.
That's right. Gold. So here's where I want to start. You, Eli, on top of being one of our favorite fellow podcasters, and I'm sure most of our listeners know you from God Awful Movies and The Scathing Atheist.
You've got 12 shows now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I have significantly more shows than I have children.
Right.
Yeah, you have shows and babies. That's insane.
You have your real children and your son.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, you are a magician. You are paid to trick people, and clearly, people are super easy to trick if you're willing to put in the work. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you put it really well, I think you put it really well in your segment last week when you talked about how therapeutically NLP turns out to be bunk. Well, the good news is, it's bunk and entertainment too. It's bunk all the way down. There's no turtles at the bottom, I promise.
And that is good news. That is good news. Let's start by this. Because I eventually want to get to what kinds of things are likely to be real and what's likely to be just sort of well-prepared clever people tricking other people. But let's just start with, what is mentalism? Because I know that that's a big part of your act.
Yeah, so mentalism is a branch of magic that uses the tricks of sleight of hand, right? The same tricks that you use to pull a bunny out of a hat or make a rabbit appear to simulate the experience of mind reading, right? It is the illusion of mind reading.
You're telling me you don't read minds?
I do not.
What?
I can barely read my own, let alone other people's.
I am furious. I want my money back for the show that I've never attended. Okay, so you use tricks. How, like, it seems impossible that you can make me think that you've read my mind through just sort of the same kinds of trickery that you would use. Do you have an example that you can sort of talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you use Darren as an example. I know Darren mildly. He's a very, very sweet person. But his presentation style leads a lot of people to believe he is doing something that he is not. So without revealing that part of his show, because I don't have permission to do it, that part of the show is a magic trick that has nothing to do with hypnosis or influence or anything to do with another person's brain, really, right? It is an ordinary magic trick in the way that if he had just made money appear out of his hands when paying for something, it would be a similar magic trick. But I have worked on specials and I've written my own act, and so I can use my own act as an example of magic tricks that are made to look like something else.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love it.
So I did a TV special up in Canada that I worked on for a friend of a friend, and this is true. It's for BYU TV. It was for BYU TV. Yes.
When you told me that, I nearly fell out of my chair. I was so happy.
It's funny because BYU TV is like that's BYU is in the Mormon university here in Utah. But their TV thing, they're really trying to make sort of more universal television.
Yeah, BYU TV has been tricking people for years. It's not.
Yeah.
It's been lying to people for years.
We worked on a magic special up there for them for 3 months. And there's so many stories from that, especially the time that we were doing a trick on an 11-year-old. Sorry, this is a tangent, but I have to. We were doing a trick on an 11-year-old who was wearing shorts, and the BYU representative who was there for cleanliness was like, she's wearing shorts. It's too sexual. We can't use this shot. And I was like,
an 11-year-old?
I was like, she's 11. And then there was this pause where he didn't want to say, you can't fuck an 11-year-old. And I didn't want to say, do you want to fuck an 11-year-old? Which in a work environment is always weird. Unless, of course, you're dealing with Hillary Clinton. So one of the tricks that we did for this special, right, and he is just sort of a general magician, but one of the tricks that we did is we went to the library at Brigham Young University. We went to the research department there, right, and we went to this big stack of shelves, and this girl went to any shelf she wanted with the host of the show, and she pulled down any book she wanted, and she opened up any page she wanted, and then she ran her fingers over the page, and she found a big word, and he pressed his fingers to his temple, and he slowly gathered those words that guessed the word one letter at a time, right? Focus on the letters. Is that an L right there at the beginning? It is. All right. And there at the end, focus on that letter. Is that an R? Is the word you're thinking of a loudspeaker? And of course the girl loses her mind and she's amazing. Now, because of the presentation we put around that, it doesn't seem like a magic trick. It seems like the process, right? And this is the big thing about mentalism. It seems like the process is happening when he's saying focus on the letters, think of that first letter, think of that last letter. But the trick was already done. And the way I know this is because I helped design this trick. And what we did is we stacked an entire shelf of this library with the exact same book with different covers on it. And that book was made of the exact same page over and over and over. Oh, my God. And that page contained nothing but nonsense 3-letter words except for the word loudspeaker, which we put on that page about 11 different times.
Oh, funny.
And so we used a combination of, an old mentalist trick that's called a book test, and that's been around for as long as books and frauds have been around. That magic trick has been around of using a fake book and pretending it's a real book. But We use that, and we also use TV magic, right? Because if you remember at the beginning, I said that in the special, you show her going to any shelf she wants. And that's kind of true. Every time we said, okay, what floor do you want to go to? And she was like, let's go to the second floor. And I was like, oh, they're actually having a thing in there. Can we use the research department? And she was like, yep. And so we just went up to the research department. And then, I told my lighting guy to walk over. She walked over to the shelf she chose. And he was like, hey, it's actually really dark over here. Can we use that shelf? And she was like, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, great. Can we just get a shot of you choosing that shelf? I mean, it really doesn't matter, right? Because that's TV magic, right? And And it's a lie that we never had to tell to our audience. But if you watch that special, you will see a girl choose a floor, choose a shelf, choose a book, and choose a word. And your brain does not go to, how did they switch out that book? Your brain goes to, how did he pluck those letters from her mind?
Right. Yeah, and it's so funny because one would almost believe that a person who is paid to trick people, it's shocking to find out that they're liars.
Yes. I forget who said it, but there's a magician who says that the camera tricks that people don't think about are the most disappointing, right? They're the ones where it's like, hey, that guy's too fat. We got to use our stooge, right?
Wow. Okay. Well, I see that tricking people as a magician is relatively easy, and there are ways to do it. But here's the thing. I know people who love magic, really enjoy a fun magic show, and yet don't apply the same skepticism when they see, for instance, someone like, a psychic or a medium performing in front of a large crowd. Yeah. And I just think to myself, to me, I think that the real thing is that magicians are willing to admit that they're bullshit.
Yeah.
That they're tricking. But, let me ask you this, Eli. Do you have any thought? Is there anything in you that believes that there could be a real psychic or a real medium or something like that?
I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible for there to be a real psychic or a real medium because I don't have complete and perfect knowledge. What I can say is, to borrow from Tim Minchin, every mystery ever solved has turned out to be not magic, right? Yeah. So every psychic we've ever examined has turned out to be not psychic. And there are really good and reasonable and scientific ways to examine psychics and mediums right now. And pretty much all of them, all the ones that are popular, the ones you've heard of, like, James von Prague or John Edward, or what's that lady who died who told the woman that her daughter was dead when she wasn't dead. I'm forgetting her name. But
Sylvia something?
Sylvia Brown. Yeah, Sylvia Brown. Yeah. These are all people who were openly exposed, but the media it's one television show. I forget who said this. I think it was James Randi said, you get one episode out of exposing a medium. You get 4 episodes a season if you pretend they're real and let them come on and talk to people's dead relatives.
Right.
Right. So the media and culture at large is largely incentivized not to debunk these things. But if you ask most people about John Edwards, whether he has a gift or whether he's a fraud, I mean, he has been out and out exposed multiple times by using an earpiece. He has former employees and staff who are like, yeah, we research people, or we have them fill out a questionnaire and then we give him those answers. But those things, that truth doesn't get the same press as his 30 minutes of edited content on the Sci-Fi Channel or whatever the case may be.
And not only that, but I think one of the things that we can learn from someone like James Randi, rest his soul, is that there's no soul. Don't worry, he's fine.
He was the final big escape.
He did recently, escape from this mortal coil. But one of the things that we can at least say for certain is, because you're right to say we can't know for certain if there's such a thing as psychics or mediums, but we know that we can replicate what they do effectively without any psychic abilities.
Yeah,
would you agree with that?
If you're going to see, it's like the Peter Popoff thing and the John Edwards thing. If you're going to go to see somebody that claims to have these magical powers, be really wary of being asked to fill out a questionnaire.
Right.
Like, it's amazing that people still believe it after giving them all that information.
And the other thing is, people think that psychics and tarot readers and mediums are, for a lot of the time, harmless fun for their superstitious aunt, right? But what most people don't know is that most tarot readers, mediums, and psychics are a very specific con. Right? Just the way that like the Jamaican luggage scam is a con, or the fucking switched envelope is a con, or the guy who picks your pocket is a con. It's a con. And the way the con works is this. You identify someone who is able to get their hands on some disposable income. You do some basic readings for them, and we could talk about how those readings work and why they feel more accurate than they actually are, but you do a couple of basic readings for them, and then you tell them that they are cursed, and they need to give you money to remove the curse. And billions and billions of dollars a year are stolen from innocent people's elderly relatives based on this con. You know, the
Right.
psychic Xena in New York was exposed, and she stole something like $150,000 from one of her clients who was, you know, making up for it by eating like food that the restaurant next door had thrown away. You know, you hear about these absolutely heartbreaking tales, and it's easy for us. Jamie and Swiss has an amazing talk on YouTube called Credit the Con Man, where he talks about it's easy for us who do not believe to be like, oh, these suckers throwing their money away at the tarot. But all of culture is built around accepting these delusions and carving out pockets for these cons. So we need to be aware that it isn't just silly.
It's not harmless.
Yeah, it's not silly and wrong. It's really harmful. And unfortunately, and I like Darren, I like his work, but unfortunately, some magicians in the public eye tell half-truths about their magic, which makes ordinary, otherwise skeptical people believe things are true of hypnotism or NLP that are not. Right. And they waste a lot of people's time and money that way.
Yeah, and people oftentimes make really serious life decisions based on this quote unquote advice, right? Medical decisions, marital decisions, all, you know, it isn't just harmless fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, but as a mentalist, as someone who sort of your stock and trade has been in, you know, you're honest about the fact that it's trickery, but surely people have come up to you and genuinely thought you must have some sort of power.
Yeah, absolutely. I have people come up to me after shows, well, had post-COVID, got to use that past tense. But I've had people come up to me after the shows and say, you know, I lost my daughter a few years ago, and I would love to communicate with her. Are you able to do that? And I stopped. I mean, obviously, I'm a skeptic for a living, so I'm a little bit more extreme. But I will bring my show and my character to a screeching halt to clarify to someone that I am just a magician doing tricks. You know, the line I use at the beginning of the show is... people always ask me if I can actually read their minds. And the answer is, and my show takes place in Midtown Manhattan. So I say, if I could actually read your mind, I would not be in Midtown Manhattan doing card tricks. I'd be in Las Vegas right now with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on one arm and Sylvia Plath on the other. It's 2021. Get woke. Like, that's my joke, but it is a line I've put in my show on purpose to clarify to people I do not have any psychic powers. And when someone comes up to me and says, like, but seriously, because no one ever says, you are psychic, where did you get your magic from? People will say, like, but seriously, is that like something about my face? Was it the way I held my face, or like the way I looked with my eyes? And I say, it's a magic trick. It's the same exact method as your uncle doing that trick where he lays out 3 piles of cards. And when I use that point of contact, when people recognize that old hacky card trick, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, where you deal out the 3 piles, which pile's it in, you do that 8 million times or whatever, and then here's your card. Oh my God, that was boring. When I say, like, I'm using the same stuff as that, I give my audience a really great gift. And it's funny. It's very comparable to atheism in that way, because the gift I give them is wonder, and wonder is rare, right? Yeah. When I say I have no magic powers, and that girl opened up the book and got to go to any page and got to pick any word, she was blown away. She had an experience of a lifetime. I have people who keep cards that I've found or, words that I've quote unquote divined in their wallet for years. And they hustle up to me at an event and go, no, do you remember my cousin Steve? And I thought of cousin Steve and you knew. It doesn't matter that I looked at the piece of paper when he got a different drink or something. Right. He remembers me reading his mind, and we did it in a safe way that the gift I left him with is wonder. Right.
Yeah.
And I do mental demonstrations in my act, which use magic techniques to talk about real things. So an example is I talk about memory in my act, and then I memorize a deck of cards instantly right there. So I shuffle up a deck of cards, and then I memorize that deck right away, and I can recite it back to front and tell people which card is at which number, and it's the closer to my show. It's a very impressive mental feat, and it's possible and it's real. It's not how I do the trick, because that shit's hard, but it's possible and it's real.
That's awesome. Well, Eli Bosnick, I feel like you've ruined so many psychics' lives right now.
Good, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. If our listeners want to hear more of your delightful self, where should they go to track you down?
They can check out God Awful Movies, where we review the worst that Christian cinema has to offer, which
Sometimes you have really cool guests.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the best episodes include your audio uncles, of course.
Uh-huh.
There's The Scathing Atheist, where if you're tired for the loving and gentle and lovey tone of this show, you just want someone to scream fuck in your ears, you've got us over at The Scathing Atheist. There's The Skeptocrat, and our new show, D&D Minus, where I try to make Heath Enright play by the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, and that's an achievement for anybody.
If you guys don't know God Awful Movies, can I just tell you, the other day I was puttering around the house and I re-listened to the Star Wars Holiday Special Gamcast, and there was two things I have to say I was in tears. One is Noah was trying to say softcore porn and ended up saying soft poor corn.
Yep.
And now I want that product more than anything else in my life. And, and then when they were in Life Day, when they were all walking towards the light, and you said it was going to be a Wookiee Jonestown, I had to sit down. It was beautiful. So thanks for that.
Oh, thank you for having me on. As always, this is, I save these shows and give them to myself as a treat. I love your show so much. I recommend it to anyone who's like, I'm thinking about listening to it. And I'm like, Audio Uncles, how to
This is just another one of Eli's tricks, people.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, as long as you're using your powers for good, we're all in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Turn over a tarot card with your picture on it. I see a Stitcher account in your future.
Thank you so much, man.
Tons of fun.
Well, friends, that's it for this week's show.
Hey, we'd love to hear from you. If you don't believe that psychics aren't real, I don't know what that is, send us an email, howto@howtoheretic.com.
Or if you are in the sciences and think there is a way to combine the words Christian and comedy safely in the laboratory, call us about it at 903-88-HOW2, which is 903-884-6986. Or you can send me that formulae on Twitter at HowToHeretic.
And as always, thanks to our incredible patrons.
And, of course, thanks to our satanic high priest, Cody Layton, for editing the show.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in.
Bye, friends.